Shirley here with Sirius Dallas Moon. And as the moon is approaching Sedna, um, applying to trine Pluto, we can see that since yesterday, there has been conversations regarding any settlement, any peace talks between the West and Iran. So I have said most of what I have to say regarding that, and this is when I took a note of how do we beat a fundamentalist regime. Okay, so you want to watch my video, how do we beat a fundamentalist regime? If you're on BitChute, I need to re-upload this video or re-record something even better. And I was dealing today with a Beta Per Se story, and the question is, will there be peace talks? And will they be fruitful? Well, Lilith is in the 10th house yesterday, squaring Mars. Mars and Jupiter are in good relationships. This is why there was a beginning of a peace talk. The moon was in Taurus, separating from a square to Pluto, which made the West understand that they're not energetically sovereign, which makes them susceptible to infrastructure attacks from Iran. Um, Now, when it comes to the aspects, Jupiter, well aspecting Mars, is good for peace talks. It's when our beliefs and philosophy and our actions can come to an agreement. But Lilith is squaring in the 10th, and Lilith is squaring from Aldebaran, from Antares. The moon is applying to Aldebaran, but Lilith is squaring from Antares. Now, if Aldebaran is a physical material wind, okay, and if the wind in Aldebaran is rapey, then it is a Pyrrhus wind. Okay, and again, I know I tend to that topic a lot because at wartime it comes up a lot. Um, but this is not about blame and shame. Like I said, you can watch my series on the Detru dossiers. Okay, the patent of torturing, raping a child. Only honoring them or basically offering good feedback when they do evil to innocent people, asking them to kill their own good self, so to speak, in a child that looks like them but is not from the particular group, whether it's network or society or lineage. And that perpetually becomes an offender, and then that's their only route to housing. Um, and they are supposed to extort big people in big junctures, basically to loot money, to loot opportunities, to energy siphon, and anything that stands on energy siphoning is indeed a bubble, it's a collapse. Now, when that collapses, um, it is overwhelming for everyone because the generated traumas people already become aware of, okay? They already become so-called enlightened to actually blackmail. They need to use fear tactics, but fear comes from those who have nothing to offer. And acquiescing to fear brings more extortion. And so people, and not only that, when people begin to leave, they also use anything of recovery, healing, um, okay, the good things. So people receive through basically forced blackmail their needs, okay, emotional needs, in the closest to adaptive way, and then they want out of anything that's trauma bond, anything that's misplaced arousal. And then there's nothing to siphon. And this is why I said when I talked about this morning doing a beta per se talismans, and of course it's important to pay attention to all the details, that beta per se is not eclipsing and so on and so forth. But it's also important to understand what is beta per se. We cannot do beta per se talisman or work with beta per se without basically setting boundaries to energy siphoning. Okay, because what happened to beta per se? She was raped. Athena profited from that. She was raped by Athena's partner, Poseidon, I think it was. And Athena profited from that. She profited wealth. Now it can be that Athena was sleeping with Poseidon and looting him, and then he couldn't be with Beta per se because Beta per se was not mingling with warlocks. And then what happens is that he rapes the Beta per se. And basically Beta per se comes to Athena, and Athena punishes her. Although Beta per se appreciates Athena, venerates Athena, but she was not seeing it coming that Athena was profiting off the rape of Beta per se. And when Athena sees that, she says Beta per se was third party, that she seduced Poseidon. She punishes her. She turns her head into snake, as though it was Beta per se that wanted, or that was hungry, so to speak. And all the terrible things. Now, Athena and Ares had a lot of fights. Ares would mostly not win, but Ares' job was not to win wars, it was to defend from rape. When Athena was about to have a Pyrrhus win, there would be dead bodies upon dead bodies from Beta per se. Beta per se work, or Beta per se veneration, or beta. And what I mean by veneration is very simple things. Simply taking a note when the moon is next to Beta per se. Whether somebody does a talisman, make sure that Beta per se is not eclipsing. Now, and the understanding that when we talk about Beta per se, it means that just as I would not call a person that was raped crazy, or say that they were trying to seduce somebody or something like that, then it also means that I ask myself, well, the rapist, he was also created by particularly that Beta per se story. Now to come out of that 22 is basically into love that is actually loving. And to understand that all of that happened because of attempt to siphon wealth and natural resources. Very related to the question of peace talks today. Because Lilith, that is with Antares, is about the philosophical. It's a win in a battle, but it's a philosophical win in a battle. It's defending from ailment. And you see, just as I talked and I was coughing, and when I say what is sitting on my lungs, that the children of my colleagues have to paint monsters because those Beta Per Se stories are around them as children. People that I learned astrology from. People that I learned about Beta Per Se from. And so, if I ask myself how to speak, Lilith with Antares is about protection from ailment. And indeed, when I speak about this right now, I feel so much better. Because I had to speak, it was sitting on my lungs. And Lilith reminds us that we cannot have peace talks as long as there's energy siphoning. And the peace that will be achieved will not be complete. With Aldebaran, yes, people can have a win, but it can be a Pyrrhus win. And it's a Pyrrhus win if that win was rapey. Now, again, the issue is the point of interference. To understand that the creation of offenders is a patent that was meant to extort and loot people out of their resources. And to not cooperate with anything that tags as crazy, the people that were raped, says that there is such thing as sex work. You know what they do to people that we call sex workers? They rape them until loss of sense of self, and then they are under mind control. A lot of people don't know that. I did not know that. And in places where we normalize this, then there is persecution. I mentioned in another video, they see the Knight Templars as Fifth Legion because they did that to their own. It's also important that a person will have a way to exit violence so that they will not become a perpetrator. All of these things in the background, then yes, we have Mars trine in Jupiter. Fantastic aspect for peace talks. But Lilith there is squaring Mars. It's squaring Mars from Aldebaran. And it's still squaring Mars and it's squaring Mercury and it's squaring the nodes. Separating from that square, but it reminds us we cannot evade the dead bodies upon dead bodies that Beta Per Se brings by swiping under the rug, trafficking, rape, looting, people making people crazy for speaking about this. People having no access to housing unless they are a Marc Dutroux. Infrastructure. Why is infrastructure not sovereign? Okay, what's the problem to build so that each house has their own solar panel that transforms water, air to the water, and the water is clear, and there is energy to the entire house? All the technology exists, in Volvo in Sweden, not the sunniest of countries. The pole that charges the electric Volvo of Geely, is solar. Okay? I'm going to say it again. The pole that charges the electric car, the electric Volvo in Sweden, is solar. Iran does not need oil. This is why my video, How Do We Beat a Fundamentalist Regime? And what communities sustain through fundamentalist regime? Rape, slavery, energy siphoning, mind control, webs, none of that works. And it doesn't matter which side of the alliance or alliances, okay, or the Epstein list contained people from all poles of the arguments. Societies that have to sacrifice people are going extinct. Because their esoteric traditions, when they meet Beta Persei, is dead bodies upon dead bodies. Why did the Egyptians feared Beta Persei so much? Eclipse days, they were really notable because they sacrificed and okay, Israel's sun is on Beta Persei. When Uranus was only beginning to approach it, there was 7th October. And then towards the end, war with Iran. Israel's route is in the 8th house. That is Taurus, where the fixed star is Beta Persei. Israel could only exist in this region as long as all the other ones were fundamentalists. But to fight fundamentalism, it's not about, oh, women could wear a short skirt. No. Zero rape, zero slavery. also towards the boys. Now Athena had strategy, but Athena was okay with profiting off of the rape and the looting. And this is where she fell short at the big wars. Okay, we think about the fall of Rome. Because Athena was the daughter of Zeus. And Zeus had a vice, it had something to do with children. When I attend into political assassination prevention, I know there are a lot of talks about this person, that person. I attend to structure. The best thing that one could do for oneself to prevent their own assassination is to abolish rape and slavery, and the rituals and the esoterics that support rape and slavery. Now, a lot of people don't like to hear that. Because they have to deal with their deepest traumas. When they were that boy in that certain age, was no longer a kid, and a friend of them were taking them to somebody they thought was sex worker. And they felt what it's like being unloved when they pay to basically rape someone that was so raped and tortured that was mind controlled to try to make them feel comfortable about raping them. And that was their introduction to sexuality. And then they would have a trauma because they would need something of that until they learned that that was the thing that caused this. They would always need something of that trauma repetitive in order to orgasm. And so they cannot have what? A partner. And this is the very light cases. And then at that juncture, their friend had to commit treason. They were taking them so that their energy would be siphoned, so that their energy would be read, so that they would be extorted. And then, all in all in life, they can be a great person. Support someone during the Me Too. Until this issue comes along, and then, if they don't face that they were, unbeknownst to them, the rapist, and they suffered the trauma of a rapist. And rapists also go through trauma. And they didn't know, they were naive, they were this, they were that. But until they don't face that, they will cause themselves all many troubles. When they do, they can go from misplaced arousal to relaxed arousal. And then basically they will stop being sadistic and masochistic towards themselves. And then somebody can sleep with them, because it's not like they're sadistic because it's their kink. And it's not like the way it exploded was, okay, let's say there was no consent there. Um, this thing is one of the first treasons or ranks that certain people do in secret societies. They have to take their male friend to someone who was trafficked and in that way introduce them to sexuality. And usually that person will have a crush on someone who's not at all, either not their age or not compatible with them or not, or that they find, I don't know, they're looking for a mother figure and then they run into the grown adult that is a grown adult as a coping mechanism for, okay, where in fact when somebody is a grown adult and as a coping mechanism, usually when it comes to intimacy they need to have somebody that they can rely on, not somebody that they need to be the grown adult in intimate situation. And all kinds of things like that, incompatibilities of the moon, is when people are in their coping mechanisms. And love is actually loving, the secure attachment. The more we are able to be aware and discern, maybe somebody that had a coping mechanism of always being kind of like the caregiver of the people around them, met another person with similar coping mechanism. Watch Teal Swan. She talks about these things. And then one person finds their emotional needs somewhat met, but they find there's always rejection when they try to make more. And what is the reason? Because that emotional need was met, evoking all many other needs that want to be met, but they cannot be met with that person because that emotional need was met because it was both people's coping mechanism. And when it comes to more erotic level, well, one person, whatever their needs, cannot accommodate for the coping mechanism of being the grown adult in situation where they were violated as a child. Okay? Not for nothing that Teal Swan talks about these dynamics way better than me. Because she survived ritual abuse at a Mormon community. And at the fundamentals of those dynamics, when we think about peace talks, those things cannot sustain. Okay? We really need to be in love that is actually loving to beat fundamentalist regimes. It's not sacrificial love. It's not just the virtue of mercy or grace. It's actually zero rape, zero slavery society. People can be safe to fall into secure attachment and relaxed arousals. And in that there is, each person has their own housing, natural resources, energy. And that is very possible. But it can't be done with energy siphoning. When it's done with energy siphoning, there would always be side effects. And the same thing they try to do with the energies that they siphoned, they are going to be basically entrapped in what they try to do with the energy that is siphoned. So, and by the way, I had a friend who had, I have disability with my bone structure of my feet. And when a person has some sort of disability, they meet people that have disabilities. And I had a friend that had a disability, and they had a friend that took them to some sort of thing that they thought it was sex worker. And then there was a female friend, and that female friend went through rape even. But when it comes to that person, she was into him. And he was trying to escape that. So what I'm saying is that no, disability is not an excuse to pay money to basically rape people that were trafficked. When we align with love that is actually loving as society, then and and here is the thing. When after the Me Too, I was working in those JDEC courses, and people began to all we were doing is reminding people to align with a yes, no, and maybe. And each of us had their own journey. Okay, we're not helping from up above. And basically, um, people began to practice. Certain people had incest in their families. Certain people were trafficked. Now, because of dissociation, a person could be not even realizing. Certain people suddenly had religious trauma, religious guilt. And then certain people began to heal, and it began to heal from candida, relief in menstrual situation. Now, like, we ain't doctors. We just, it was even before I learned anything about aromatherapy. I was using the oils for myself, but I did not study it properly. And I did not prescribe it to others, of course. Um, but that was simply, we discovered that when people are even in self-pleasure, not rapey towards themselves, and are not people-pleasing, even in bed, then they begin to recover their fifth vital sign. And then, when the group began to work with the men, we discovered that sometimes the men would have what they thought was dysfunction, but they were actually attuned because the woman was not ready. Or the other man, I don't know. But then they basically it flapped. It doesn't, like I said, it doesn't mean that when they are able to, then, or when they are hard. I'm sorry, that the other person is ready. But if they're not, yes, it can sometimes mean that they're simply attuned with the unreadiness of the other partner. And what I thought was dysfunction is actually very good function. Now, of course, when people join all kinds of society or are born into all kinds of societies, that they have to create the curse to alleviate the curse, to create a disease to alleviate disease. Okay? That's no good way of living. Beta per se is really one of the keys we have, and so is Sedna. Sedna already connects that to the energy and the infrastructure. But beta per se is one of the key factors when a society works on energy siphoning, on rape, enslavement, is no good. And the esoterics will be challenging, and the healing practitioners would all be challenging. This is why I couldn't effectively proceed working in aromatherapy, because I was not willing to do the double. And these businesses later cannot profit so much because if they curse somebody, they are indebted to fix what they cursed. The person doesn't need to pay them to fix what they cursed. Why are psychiatrists being slaughtered? Nobody, a lot of people don't talk about it, but they're being slaughtered. Because what are they complying with? They comply with saying that the raped person is crazy. And those that comply with that, eventually they're slaughtered. Of course, there can be psychiatrists that were sacrificed by their peers, and that also happens. This is why, when I learned, yes, aromatherapy, when you learn it correctly, is basically an oil is not a pill. And then I understood that, wait a second, if people, let's say, come to me with an ailment that has to do with abundance, now, the normal thing is that I would provide to them with the oil, but they would need to make the change. And when they make the change, they get the dividends. And then I can get the dividends for the oil. But if they have a problem, and I prescribe to them an oil that awakens them, then they're not forced to make that change. I don't drug them and dissociate them. Now, it's true that a lot of people in certain societies curse themselves. Um, I don't support that type of practice. And they have to remember that we are interconnected. So when they curse themselves, they're also harming others. In fact, um, I have a colleague astrologer, and she was very good with pinpointing episodes of chronic ailment. And immediately the oil that came for her was sandalwood. Um, the Australian sandalwood, the expensive one. But she said she cannot always see the ailment in the chart of the person, sometimes in the chart of their family members. For example, Lilith right now, Jupiter rules lungs. Lilith right now is in Antares as protection from ailments and so on and so forth. Antares is my 10th house of career. And Jupiter is teachers. Jupiter is also children. The child of my astrology teacher was exposed to rituals where they had to paint all kinds of monsters or something to supposedly transmute that. And I didn't know how to approach it. I heard it and I had no idea. I became sick. I was like, what is sitting on my lungs? Then I began to sing. And because I was walking nonchalantly, there are missiles, there are this, there are that. And there was like, what is sitting on my lungs? That the child of my colleagues had to be exposed to those things. So I had to stand in that Lilith sovereignty. And how the beliefs and the esoterics that did not honor zero rape, zero slavery in cultures and in societies affected children. And Lilith is usually thought to be the killer of children, but quite the other way around. Lilith is telling us that in those societies where there's no zero rape, zero slavery, it permeates also to the children. And I remember I was also a child, and I was seeing a young boy hurts a big woman. Or things that when we were taught about the Nazis, I said I knew that there is such evil in the world. I was already desensitized. But I did not have anybody. It's not that I did not have anybody to speak. I was just not thinking to speak about it. And I saw with the hand gestures that belonged to the Satanists. And I was almost channeling. I was seeing my hand like this, and it scared me. And I tried to concentrate on this so that I would not be scared. Because I was working on my fear of that shape of the hand gesture. Now, with other families, when children do speak, sometimes they're taken with the rituals. This is what happened to Teal Swan. This may have happened to Caitlin Kapak. And it's very, very important that the parents do not just trust the guru or the esoteric person, even if the parents are esoteric themselves. Um, because it's affecting the health of children. Okay, and this is also why when people talking about, well, the peace with Iran, yes, Jupiter and Mars are in very good aspect, but Lilith. And what these things that are happening to children have to do with those fundamentalists that are also trafficking people. And they invoke a lot of chaos around all kinds of identities. But they themselves don't see themselves as particular identity. It's actually an identity personality cult. Lilith with Antares, calling on Antares, is very protected. It's an opportune time to actually talk about these things. Moon going over both Beta Persei and the Sedna, really accentuating. With Sedna, children were already trafficked. And if people agree to sacrifice, then they will be asked to sacrifice more.